Hello, everybody. Nice to be here with you today. Let's take a moment and close the eyes and just go inside. Take some relaxing breaths. Nice inhale and exhale. Now this time make it just a little bit bigger inhale and just a little bit bigger exhale. Now we'll just own to bring ourselves into harmony with the God of your heart. Om. So we're going to talk about yoga practices at home. So just a little bit of background to lay a good foundation for this. Yoga means the union of our body, mind, and spirit. It's a state of being where we can experience ourselves in our truth, in harmony with who we are. We can be steady and content much of the time when we learn to trust the flow of life. But we have a lot of challenges these days with trusting the flow of life. There's one guarantee in life, and that is it's always changing. So yoga practices are meant to take us in the direction of a state of yoga. So we're just going in that direction. In that state of yoga where we can have inner freedom no matter what's happening on the outside. You know, it's the practices of yoga and Ayurveda that give us the tools and the foundation to experience life and fully step into it. So yoga and Ayurveda have become more popular these days because we need to remember who we are as eternal beings, our spiritual selves. So we've been talking the last 2 weeks about the tools of Ayurveda and how they can bring strength and stability and joy into our lives. Yoga offers us deep, spiritually oriented tools to support us in the challenges of life and to better know ourselves in the process. And as I mentioned in previous sessions, it's this lack of spiritual connection or this lack of connection to our innermost self that's at the root of our poor choices that lead us to disease. So the why of practicing yoga is really important to remember and keep in mind because that's what's at the root of our deep desires in life. You know, some of us might start practicing because we know it's good for us, because it makes us feel physical and we feel better, or because we heard it will balance the doshas, or because we like to get together with other people. But it helps to consider that it's also a hello to our spiritual self. And that's what feeds that good feeling that comes from all of the yoga practices. Yoga is a personal practice. It's very much an individual practice. Like Ayurveda, it's not one size fits all. Traditionally, it was taught one-on-one, and the teacher gave the student practices to do and sent him or her home to do them. Then after a period, the student and the teacher would come together again and see what the next steps were to be. So this is how I did it for many years, and there's no competition and no comparison, no performance, no distractions. Well, maybe a few around your house if you let yourself. And so that's what we're going to talk about. So it's really just, it's you and your journey of self-discovery, so that we can go out into the world and be ourselves. So I'm going to mention a few things that might be helpful to keep in mind. What you practice in life is what you get more of. That makes sense? Sure. With yoga practices, it's most important, there's 3 B's that I think of. It's most important to be conscious and present in whatever you do. A conscious 5-minute practice will take you much further and be much more beneficial than a 20-minute practice of rushing around, kind of mechanical and being distracted. So being conscious in whatever you do. The next is being consistent. the body and the mind respond to consistency. It makes us feel more secure to have something that we know is there for us. And it keeps Vata dosha calm, which reduces anxiety and fear. So be consistent. And then the third thing is to be balanced. So the practice needs to be balanced. You need to consider your condition on that particular day. So how do you do that? Well, the practices are really all about moving prana, our life force, through the body and our aura, our energy field around the body. And this is what has us feel alive and great. And the very best way to do this and to start with this is to work with your breath. In all of the practices, we connect with the breath. Sometimes it's with sound, and there'll be notable feeling. And sometimes it's very subtle and quiet. And there's still feeling. So what does this all have to do with establishing a home practice? Well, everything. Because if you keep those things in mind and say, okay, establish for yourself, why am I doing this? Then that's how it becomes part of our foundation. It's part of us. It's not just something that we do on the side. So let's set the scene. A consistent location for your practice is really necessary. Your spiritual energy will collect there and it'll call to you at times. If it's a special room, that's great if you can do that. But if you can't, that's okay. A corner of a room, somewhere that doesn't have traffic or people walking across it would be ideal. And make a small altar for yourself with things that have deep meaning to you. It might be just one thing, that's fine. You might also burn a stick of incense there daily to help clear the energy. So try to have that corner or space used only for your practices and not for other things. Be sure to bathe before you practice, about a minimum, face, hands, and feet. Rinse your mouth, clean your teeth, and the other parts of your dinacharya, your daily routine. Arising and moving into your practices before 6 a.m. will have you practicing in the Vata time of day when the energy in the air is lighter and it's cleaner. And the divine energies are more present. It's called Brahma Muhurti. And you'll also just have more energy through the day by getting up that early. Of course, what that means is that you need to go to sleep. And so you need to go to sleep before 10 o'clock because after 10 o'clock, Pitta and the fire element comes up and we start to have more energy and then we want to stay up and then you might want to eat and do things like that. That's not what we need to be doing. We need to be sleeping so that the body can heal and the mind can rest. But you need enough sleep to have your practices. You know, having good quality and quantity of sleep is one of the 4 pillars of health in Ayurveda. But if you're not ready to get up earlier, then doing the practice when you arise is great. Morning is better because it sets the tone for the day. But other times will work too, but consistency is the most important thing. So pick a time and stick with it as best as you can. We all know sometimes something happens, but you really have to make some decisions about what you're going to let interfere with it, which I would suggest would be not much. If you let it really be the foundation, you probably don't go out the door very often without brushing your teeth like that. It needs to be something that becomes a part of you. Most people find that there are a few humps to get over with a home practice. At least that's how I think of it. First, it's one thing to do something, and it's another thing to actually be willing to do it. So this is an internal decision to give it priority and to let go of the old beliefs about what you think you should be doing. And the mind, too, can become pretty lazy. And that's not relaxation. Laziness is different. The next thing is consistency. I've said that a few times. Consistency in not letting other things distract you or take priority. The mind is going to fight the practice in the beginning. The mind will fight consistency if Vata dosha is out of balance. And especially if the mind has been able to be inconsistent. In other words, you just let it run all over the place and, trying lots of different things and not sticking with anything. So this is Vata dosha in excess. That's not when Vata is balanced. So it's not a permanent condition. So the practices done properly will help you to calm Vata. And then you can start to rein the mind in. Remember, if our minds were perfectly calm, we wouldn't need to do the practices. So that's why we're doing it. Sometimes people say, my mind runs all over the place when I meditate. It does that at first. And then sometimes later it'll do it too. But what we start to learn is that we're more than our mind. And we start to make the connection to who we are beyond our mind. So it's important to prioritize things in your life in general. If you recognize what the practices can do for you, or you're ready to find out and you still don't do them, then it's really time to ask yourself a question. Am I staying focused on my priorities, or am I all over the place? We all have so much available to us these days. It's really easy to get distracted. So the simple thing to do is to write down your top 5 priorities in life. Keep them in front of you and stick to them. Look at them often. And you stop doing things that aren't in those priorities. If your friends are doing something else, great. Let them tell you about it later and you can enjoy the conversation. You won't miss out on anything, but your mind will tell you that you might. And I wouldn't pay attention to that. One thing I was taught that was digging shallow holes for a well will not get you water. Digging one deep hole will get you a well of miracles. And that's certainly been the case for me. Another common question is, do I do pranayama and meditation first and then asana, or do I do the asana first? There are reasons to do it either way. And it depends on the individual and their needs. It's nice to be able to do pranayama and meditation in the early part of the practice. But if sitting is difficult, it can be helpful to do the asana first. A good teacher will give you guidance in this and help you choose the best practices for you and the sequence, whether it's mantra, pranayama, mudra, meditation, different techniques of meditation. It should be for your constitution and asana practices for your best balance. So we provide guidance online and in person, but online for guiding you in all of those practices. Another good point, there's nowhere to get to. There's no end point with the practices. So notice your attitude about it. There's always another step to move deeper, whether it's a pose or a breathing practice or deeper in your meditation. There's always more. So we don't have to worry about achieving anything or getting into a particular point. Really important to leave out any forcing or striving. You can be determined and persistent in the practices without forcing and striving. And leave out those preconceived ideas of how you should look or feel as a result of the practice. Let it be an exploration every day. It's a great practice for the mind to be in the unknown. Let's see what's going to happen today. At Pule, we look at the student in a holistic way to find practices that are sustainable, that help you evolve as you change. This means to let yourself be in the moment with what is today. We do change from day to day. Sometimes you need a strong practice and sometimes something softer. And all of the practices should bring balance to your system, feeling energized and calm in the mind and body afterwards. We also have guidance on our new app, Live Ayurveda and Yoga. We just posted a a guided asana class there as well. Accept your starting point each time you practice. Breathe, see what's there, don't make judgments about it, and step into the practice and see. It's natural to fluctuate, and the less you judge yourself, the sooner change will come. That judge and judging is just your ego wanting to soften. It's just your ego, and we want that to soften with your practices. The ups and downs of practice are really just a natural part of life and a valuable part of our experience. And what happens over time, at least from my experience, is that the ups and downs are smaller, but they're still there. They just get fairly small. So keep going. It's a new adventure in life, and it'll take you places that you never imagined. So let your practices be the foundation of your living. And this means to set the time aside for it, along with having a regular schedule of eating and sleeping, and then fill in the rest of your life. And that's how you're going to get the best results. It doesn't have to be hours of practice either. 30 minutes is a great start. And so the practices of yoga is for you, and it is cumulative, meaning that the effects and the benefits build over time. So establish a daily practice for yourself by choosing a length of time that's reasonable for you to commit to on a daily basis, preferably in the morning. And start with the practices of pranayama, meditation, and asana, if at all possible. Okay, so we look for this building of the practices over time. So there's much more benefit if you practice a small amount on a daily basis rather than a longer period less frequently. In other words, practicing 10 minutes a day is better than going and doing 1 hour once a week. And choose a time frame that's manageable to you and set that as your baseline. And if you have more time on certain days, then you could increase the length of the practice if it felt like it was right that day. And it's good. You can get guidance then in what are the things that you would do in addition. And in particular, at the time you're ready to increase your pranayama practice or meditation, then there are always going to be more practices, as I mentioned. And so there's some very specific practices that help to balance dosha and help to balance all the energy flow, the chakras, and that. So just let yourself be with what's happening today. And that's really one of the great gifts of yoga. It brings freedom to be yourself. So consider that with the practices of yoga, use your breath to master the mind, and then the mind to master the senses. So your personal at-home practice will strengthen your mind, support you so that you can make better choices in how you use your senses, how you use your 5 senses, so that you can live longer and have a better quality of life. We do have the ability to create heaven on earth within ourselves. So let's see if we have any questions today.
We do. Home practice doesn't show me if I am holding the pose in a way that is beneficial and not harmfully. Thoughts?
Okay. So talking about if I'm practicing asana postures, a home practice doesn't tell me if I'm doing it incorrectly. And this is really one of the things that happens when you do a home practice, which is you learn how to feel yourself. So yes, in the beginning, there are things that you need to learn. You need to learn about alignment and learn about how the joints in the body function so that you're not taking your joints beyond their optimum range of motion and harming them. So the way that happens is by feeling it. And so understanding then that with asana practice, that there's a lengthening and strengthening that goes on with the muscles. And it's not about stretching joints, because joints are fairly delicate in a lot of ways. And what we do is that we strengthen the muscles so that it supports the joints to be able to stay stable and strong. So learning about alignment, learning about, and it doesn't have to, it's not a huge intellectual endeavor. It's about feeling your body. So one of the things that we do is that we use the wall as a guide. And most of the time you can find some kind of wall space to help you with the poses and that. And so there are a number of ways that you can do that that will help. And the other thing that is really important is to develop a relationship with your spine, because it's an incredible integral part of our being in the physical body. And so that relationship, in other words, being willing to pay attention, and when you have pain, then you're doing something that the body's trying to tell you, don't do this way. There's probably another way. And that's when you get some instruction.
Okay. There's a lot of talk lately about honoring your needs, whether it's online classes or while adjusting to a new schedule. Sometimes those needs feel like a nap. Sometimes they feel like a restorative practice instead of vinyasa flow, etc. How can we tell if we are honoring our needs or just being lazy? Discernment seems a bit blurry right now.
Yes, discernment is something that's talked about in the yogic texts. It's called vivek. And vivek comes with some of the things that I talked about earlier today. When we let go of our attachments to it should look a certain way or it should get to a certain point, those kinds of things. When we let go of those things, our discernment gets better. So it's something that comes with the practices over time. Now there's something, the laziness is part of something called tamas. And tamas is, it's the darkness of life. There's a lot of tamas on the planet right now, and there's probably more than I've known in my life, for sure. And so we need to counter that. We need to recognize that we can recognize the difference between, for example, I'd say I didn't get any sleep last night, and so I feel like I need a nap. Well, in the general sense, it's not good to take a nap. What you need to do is go to bed early this next night, right? So napping during the day will increase that tamas, or that darkness and stagnation. And that's that tamas that pulls us, that makes us feel lazy. Like, oh, I don't want to do it. Yeah. And so the best way to connect with that is to say hello to yourself. Just say hello to your spirit. Pay attention to your breath, and I'll bet you'll get an answer. And sometimes, again, if you're totally exhausted, an asana practice is probably not the answer. A little bit of breathing, maybe a quiet meditation might be okay. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. And just remember that the other activities that you do in life make a difference in how much of that tamas is there. And what we're doing is we want to direct our energy, which is with something called rajas, or the activity of life, toward sattva, which is the balance and the harmony and the light of our consciousness.
Okay. Someone asked, if you're very new, where should you begin? Yeah.
I would begin with the things that I mentioned today, with carving out some time. Start maybe with 5 minutes, whatever, but make it something that's doable for you, that you're actually willing to give the time and not let other things interfere. I'd start there and start by simple breathing practice and sitting in silence for a few minutes. Yeah, and we'd be happy to give you some guidance on that.
That leads into another question. What are some ways to become willing in waking up early for a yoga practice?
Well, it really has to do with feeling. If you think about maybe if you think about when you sat in front of a campfire, or you did something that you just loved, and not necessarily something overly active, but that you just had that feeling inside of peace uh, and something that just made you feel really good, not high, but just good, right? So you have to decide that you want that connection. Yeah. So that's what the decision is about. But like I said, when we've been doing a lot of other things, we're used to being really overly active, or we're used to being kind of lazy and having a lot of tamas, then you got to start really small. I've had many people that I've guided to just start. Okay, start with 3 minutes in the day. Set a timer for yourself. And just do that, and just close your eyes and be quiet and focus on your breath. Because the breath, this is a big thing too, to remind yourself through the day, the breath is the source of our life force. If you're holding your breath during the day and your shoulders are going up and that kind of thing, that's just cutting yourself off from life. So working with the breath is a great place to start.
Do you recommend an online guided yoga practice, or a practice guided only by you or yourself, I think she means?
Online meaning a recorded kind of thing?
Yeah. Following on with a screen, like a yoga class.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning, you have to look at it, right? You need to either you need someone guiding you, word by word, yeah. And you might need to look at it, but it's good to look at it and not be practicing it necessarily. So look at it a couple of times without that, and then see if you can put it together just by listening. Looking at it while you're practicing is not a great thing. Again, if you do it a couple of times in the beginning, that's fine. As an ongoing practice, it's really not good, because you're not fully paying attention to what you're doing. And remember, that first thing I talked about today was to be conscious in what you're doing. That means don't split your attention. Splitting your attention also aggravates vata dosha. So focus on one thing at a time. But the listening is good, yeah, because again, it uses that sense, and then it forces you to start to relate to your body. See, the thing that happens when you have with classes and that too is like, then you just kind of hear the instructions, you get mechanical about it, and you just go on automatic pilot. You have to be very careful about that. And so that's why your own practice is really so important. If you think about how much you might, if you go to classes, yeah, and that if you took that and put it all together, then you could get some individual instruction and just work with that. That's what I would suggest. And then you go to class for fun, but it's not the best way for you to really progress in your individual practice. Good. Okay. Great. It's really nice to see all of you here today, and I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, just let us know. And if you're looking for some guidance in asana, check out the Live Ayurveda and Yoga app on iPhone, and soon to be on Android. Right. Namaste.